Welcome back to Culture Crush. Today we're talking about 3 questions to take you from beige to brilliant. And I'm joined by the wonderful Michelle Hartley. Michelle, we've been trying to make this happen for an awfully long time, so it's great to welcome you finally to the show.
It is great to be here, thank you, and I really appreciate you being so patient with my diary.
Oh, no, mine too. I think we've ended up having probably 3 or 4 just having a cup of coffee rather than, and ended up not hitting record. So they were lovely chats though. I mean, we got to know each other well, which was lovely.
This is very true.
Now, speaking of getting to know you, not something that we planned to discuss, but I'd like to touch on your mother and her commitment to your podcast appearances. What's your mum's name? You were telling me actually just before we recorded that she's got a playlist of all your podcast appearances.
Yes, right? Yes. Oh, I love this. She is going to love this so much. So my mum is called Pat, and she has a whole playlist of my Spotify of all the podcasts that I've been appeared on. So I said to you, we're going to have to attach this one as one for my mum's playlist.
Well, Pat, consider this maybe your first ever formal podcast shout out.
Yes.
We are thrilled. I mean, we stand with you, Pat. We are all massive fans of what Michelle is doing in the world, how she's showing up with just like pure, brutal authenticity, you being you. So, Pat, we are all fans. And, I would be delighted if you'd make a playlist for me too, because my mum has not made such a high level commitment to my podcasting career.
Boo.
She's very encouraging, but Heather's not a really podcasty person. Yeah, she's not, she hasn't got Spotify. She probably doesn't know what that is.
Yeah.
But Heather, if you are listening to this, shout out to you too. Shout out to all the mums. Mums are cool.
Yay for mums.
Yay for mums. Now, we're going to be talking about some really powerful questions to help people step into a new world of confidence, challenge themselves to grow just a little bit. But before we do any of that, I just wanted to remind people about how these episodes work. Because what Michelle did is Michelle joined me for Culture Crush Live. It was a few months ago now, but it's a live get-together with around 30 other people where we explore these questions live. But what that means is that Michelle and I go on to have a really, really great conversation, much deeper than the conversation that we would have had if it was just us talking. We're actually bringing in the thoughts, opinions, feelings, and reflections from everyone who joined Culture Crush Live. So if you're interested in being involved in co-creating one of these episodes, come along. It'd be great to see you there. And you never know, you might get a little shout out like Pat and Heather. I mean, they haven't been, but you get the idea. But I wanted to ask some questions, not to you, Michelle, but I wanted to ask you, the audience, some questions, some things that I want you to lean into as you listen to the quality and the flow of our conversation. These questions are important because they're going to help set the tone and help you step into that reflective mindset. Number 1, I want to know if you're giving yourself enough credit. Who sets the crazy high standard that you're trying to reach? Who told you that you needed to hit certain goals and milestones or post consistently? And where does that pressure come from? Number 2, are you getting in your own way and making things too complicated? Maybe you're a team leader and you're thinking about, how do I make this a really fantastic next meeting with my team? And maybe you're just overthinking it. Or maybe you're a founder and you're trying to puzzle, like, how do I get found? Like, how do I get my business seen? And you're just injecting too much complication. How do you keep things simple? And the third question is, do you find your goals liberating, or are they a constant guilt trip? Michelle, I don't know if you wanted to kind of come back on that third one, but how do you feel about your to-do list?
I feel like my to-do list is a wicked mistress. Like, she's evil. It's really, really interesting, isn't it? I loved that question because it really made me think, and it gave me that like stomach drop feeling of like oof, like a proper oof question. And I think, and it's interesting because it comes back to the overthinking point you had earlier as well, where I constantly overthink things, and then I think, am I overthinking too much? But the same with my to-do list. I'll drop loads of stuff on there, and then it becomes this massive beast that I can never tackle. And so it just becomes this then festering thing that constantly pecks my head every time I sit at my desk. So yeah, I have the feels for the to-do list one.
Yeah, me too. Well, the reality is that some of the things that we're going to be exploring, these 3 questions take you from beige to brilliant, are hopefully going to help people address some of those kind of like questions we've just put forward there. So hopefully that sets the tone. If you're listening or watching today, hopefully that helps you step into that reflective space, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to move some minds. And there's a big question actually for you, Michelle, that I'm asking all my guests these days is, are you ready to change a life? I mean, it sounds super grand, but there's a good reason for this. And
That
probably
is-
a short answer. I mean, the answer is probably yes.
Well, yes. What a powerful question, though. I don't ever think about, and we were talking about this before we hit record, I never think about how my stuff lands, right? Because I do my content and my stuff online for me. Like, it's stuff that I love, it's stuff that I think is funny, it's stuff that I want to share with the world. But I never really think about how it lands for other people. And so that is a proper ooze question, right? How do you feel about changing lives? Like, that's bananas to me, because I just don't think about it. But you know what? I get often DMs, messages from people, little voice notes that say, oh my God, I read that thing and it was amazing. And, you know, you really moved me on where I needed to be, you know, and it just is fantastic. So yes, ready, but oof, what a question.
I always feel like it's too grand to ask. Like, I always feel like it's too big. But the reality is that somebody who, people will hear me talk about this regularly on the show now, but somebody's going to be coming to this for the first time, and they are going to respond differently to their theme tomorrow, or they are going to make a different leadership decision, or they're going to walk through the door at home at the end of a busy day and not snap at their kids. Because there's going to be something in our conversation that just gives them pause. And I've actually started to think about, when I'm doing this kind of work with people, rather than just kind of giving you a framework or here are some questions to ask, I'm now starting to say to people, when you are in the queue, in the cafeteria, in lunch, I want that to be the moment when you pause and remember this question. Or when you're on your commute to work and you're sitting on a stinky bus and you're thinking, what am I going to think about? I want that to be the moment when you think about this, because actually by pointing out, signposting these moments that everybody experiences most days, or kind of figuring out, what is the moment that, you might walk the dog, signal those moments, because that person then, when they're in that moment, will go, oh, there was that question that Michelle asked me. And you spend a moment thinking about it, and it is going to change your behavior. So, yes, we might be making small changes, but changes nonetheless. Now, we're going to talk about these three big questions shortly. But before we do any of that, for anyone who hasn't met you yet, why don't you give us a few headlines about what you're doing in the world and how you're doing it, and the kind of the wild ride you're taking people like me on.
Yeah. So the funny answer is basically I just dick about on LinkedIn. And that's how it feels to me. The real answer is I transform HR teams from beige to brilliant, and I do that in a couple of different ways. I will do some one-to-one coaching with HR pros. I run a program called Find Your Awesome, and I have my very own HR community called the HR Geek Squad. So that's really like 95% of what I do in my business, and then the remaining 5% I do things for teams and leadership teams. So I will often do away days, team building days, lots of fun stuff, insights discovery based psychometrics, that kind of stuff. And I think it's also worth saying I am also a speaker as well. I'm also a professional speaker, so I often go and speak at events on mental health, women's health, women at work kind of stuff. So yeah, it sounds like a lot when you say it like that, doesn't it?
Well, it is a lot. I mean, I don't know. I observe you from a distance, and I do think to myself, I'm not sure how Michelle's doing all this.
Well, same.
But you're also, you cause a bit of a stir. Some of the things that you do on LinkedIn are viewed by the LinkedIn overlords as controversial. And recently you were faced with, I mean, you almost got yourself banned, didn't you? I mean, you got some content taken down, and I missed it. I saw the kind of like the aftermath. Like, I saw the shockwave of this content you put out there, but totally missed the story. So what did you do? And how did you avoid kind of getting completely kicked off?
You know what? When that content got banned, I've never been so afraid of something in all my life, because I was like, holy shit, I have just really messed up here, because I literally run my life and my business through LinkedIn, and I nearly got banned. I am a fool. But for context, for people that don't follow me or didn't see this drama, I do a Friday video every week called Stuff That Can Get in the Bin. And every week I bin things that have really made me rage, or things that have really annoyed me, or just things that people have submitted to me that I just think that is brilliant, we're going to bin it. The idea being that you bin stuff at the end of your week so you can enjoy your weekend. So it's a bit of like a let it go, cathartic thing. So this particular week in question, the lovely orange potato that we will call Donald Trump, was basically being as ridiculous as he usually is. And so I binned him that week, and I had got a special Donald Trump doll who now features every week, but he was in there for the first time. And I binned him. Now, when I binned him, because I also bin Jeremy Clarkson every week, right? And when I bin Jeremy Clarkson, I say, I'm binning Jeremy Clarkson this week on the hopes that he leaves, dies, or gets cancelled, preferably all three very soon. So that's what I did with Donald Trump. But I added in an extra piece, which was leaves, dies, gets cancelled, or assassinated very soon. Now, apparently, it's inappropriate to call for the assassination of a sitting president. So yeah, got banned.
That, what I thought had happened is he just said something rude about Donald Trump, and lots of kind of Trump supporters like report the post, and eventually, if it reaches a certain threshold, the LinkedIn
police get you. Yeah,
their ivory tower go, well,
yeah,
that Michelle, she's a rabble rouser. We must remove her video. but actually, hearing it now, I think yes, maybe I have more sympathy with LinkedIn than I had anticipated, because that is that's kind of provocative and out there. But it totally is. But and I don't know if you do this when you do your videos, but I get really excitable and I just get really carried away. So I was just doing my usual like comedy. Oh yeah, this would be really funny. I didn't even think about it until I went to appeal the ban, and they were like, no, because you can't call for the assassination of a sitting president. And that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I'm very sorry that I did something so inappropriate if the LinkedIn gods are listening. But I'm not sad that I've been Donald Trump. Well, no, and I have to say, keep binning stuff, because those videos are absolutely hilarious and liberating. Because so often you're saying things that, perhaps with this exception, I can't say that I've thought exactly that myself. But often, you've binned Greg Wallace, you've binned Jeremy Clarkson, you've binned the strange decision on trans rights here in the UK in recent weeks, and often you're articulating the pain, the sort of the daily political pain that the rest of us are feeling. Yes. So keep it coming. It's always entertaining, but and as with all these things, the best comedy is shot through with a little bit of truth. Maybe shot through is the wrong word for this conversation, but we didn't mean it. We didn't mean it. It's just kind of
don't ban us.
Keep that coming, and also you also post regular kind of like who are you on this scale. We've had Nicolas Cage, we've had
Kermit the Frog,
Kermit the Frog, so you can choose kind of the different emotional state based on different pictures of Kermit the Frog, Nicolas Cage, and many others. So follow Michelle's LinkedIn if you're not already, because it's a riot and you'll have a lot of fun, and occasionally a little slice of drama as well. Anyway, we're not here to talk about any of that, really. We're here to talk about three big questions that will take you from base to brilliant. And I'm going to talk about these one by one. The first one is, how do we get to yes? And I know that there are lots of team leaders going to be listening to this and they're going to be thinking, yeah, I could do with a little help. How do I get to a yes from people? The second question, what does easy look like? Which I know on our live call was a real hit with people. Like, people just kind of felt really moved by this question. And I think the third question is the one that resonated most powerfully for people, which is, what does 1% better feel like? And I think that is crucial. We're so often about productivity and how do we do things, but actually, what does that feel like? I think that is a really, really interesting twist on that question. So how do we get to the yes? You've got lots to say on this, but take us through some of your thoughts from that live session.
Yeah, I love this question because it's a real game changer. And often when I ask it, people really just stop and think. It's a really powerful question. When I used it probably the most was when I was in my last corporate role, and we had an organisation that was very, very long in tenure. So lots of people have been there for a really long time. They all worked together. They got on really well, but there wasn't really a structure that was scalable for the rest of us to come in as new people and kind of create a much bigger, more scalable business. So a lot of what we were hitting was resistance about, yeah, but we don't do that. We don't do that. We don't like that. We've tried that. And so my pitch back to them was, okay, how do we get to yes? And again, because it's such an impactful question, it would often just stop people in their tracks and really get them to think differently. You know, you could almost see the cogs turning as you asked the question. And actually it made people just think much more positively about what they could do. So instead of it being computer says no, it ended up very much being, oh, yeah, well, actually, if we did this and this, we could get to there and that would get us to this. And it just made such a massive difference. It's almost like opening the door to solutions. It's just a really powerful question that really seems to hit hard with people. And now I often use it in coaching where I have coachees who are just really struggling to get to where they need to be. And so I say, well, how do we get to yes? And it's almost like a clearing the path, letting people just suddenly focus on what they need to do to get to yes. So yeah, I just think it's a really magical question.
Yesterday, I had a Culture Crush live session with Dr. Virginia Lacayo. She's US citizen, but born in Nicaragua, half French. She's one of the smartest people I have met in the last year. You are also in that top 5. I won't reveal the exact rankings. Yes, I did. But we were talking in our conversation about labels and how some of the labels we carry don't necessarily serve us. Yep. Things like queer or mother or black or, you know, and how these labels come with expectations. They come with hidden barriers. They come with hidden blockers. And they're labels that we're often given rather than choosing them ourselves. And she asked this really great question, which I think resonates with this quite powerfully, which is about if you didn't have that expectation or you didn't believe that label about yourself, how would you behave? Oh. And one of the people on the call had mentioned that the label they carry with them is around their weight. And so they wrote that I'm fat in the chat. And it was a real kind of like impactful moment because when people are being so brutally honest on those things, I mean, it can really, really be profoundly moving. And Virginia made the point that if you didn't think that about yourself, are there parties that you don't go to that you would attend if you didn't have that label? Yeah. Are there clothes that you would feel free to wear if you didn't carry that label? And where I think it connects to how do we get to yes is almost like organizations or cultures have these kind of pre-decided ideas about who they are. They say, well, we don't do that around here. It's like, yeah, but that's kind of like a label you've adopted. And actually, when you ask the question, yeah, but how do we get to yes? It's almost like saying, but if you didn't believe that about yourself, what kind of great stuff could you do? Right?
Yeah, brilliant.
So I think there's a question here for like, maybe there's some team leaders out there who have kind of got themselves into headspace that my team is dysfunctional. So does that mean every time you show up, you're bringing an expectation of dysfunction, which sort of triggers that behavior in a way? I know I'm oversimplifying. There's some leaders out there in a lot of pain with this, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, what if actually you didn't have that expectation? How do we get to yes look like in that scenario? I don't know if you want to come back on any of those because I'm sort of taking us to cosmic places, but yeah.
No, I love it. I think it's great. I think one of the things that might link to some of my other questions actually, but one of the things that I often say to people, particularly when I'm coaching people, is why can't you just experiment with it? Go and have a go, try it as an experiment. And again, that language around experimentation feels much more exciting, doable, manageable than give it a go and, hope you don't fail. It kind of takes out that failure aspect. It's an experiment and you're getting data for your experiment. So I always think particularly with leaders, team leaders, managers, they often get quite fixed in the way that they approach things. And so I always say, well, go and experiment, go and try this one question once and just see how it lands. What's the harm in doing that? So I think that's the kind of solution for me about getting that sort of stuff out there.
Yeah, I love that. And must give a quick shout out here to John. So John joined us on the call and he was talking about, I think he was relatively new into an HR role. And he was talking about the power of praise and the the importance of reminding people how far they've come. And actually, maybe this maybe does a dance with my point there about like, if you have this idea that your team is dysfunctional, maybe it's not about like pointing out that dysfunction all the time or trying to think, how do I solve that dysfunction? Maybe it's like, how do I take these guys on a small journey? Like, what's a little bit of progress look like here? And then you can signal that progress and say, look, this is how far we've come recently. Now, so I don't think it really directly relates to this point in some respects, but it's because it's not necessarily about how you get to yes, but it's like, how do you move the people in your group, and how the power of feedback is a way that you can open up that dialogue. And maybe it's about giving people the confidence to say yes to things. Because if you're kind of told you're dysfunctional all the time, or you're not feeling confident, or you haven't been trained in a certain thing yet, or shown how to do something, it makes it very difficult for you to say, yeah, I'll do that. I'll put my hand up for that.
Yeah.
Right. And so maybe using feedback as a confidence builder for people.
Yeah.
So John, if you're listening, thank you for that. So how do we get to yes? Lots of great thoughts there. The second question, and I think these get kind of like more and more oof, as you put it, like earlier, as we progress. Second question, what does easy look like?
Yeah. And this one, and I know that this resonates with you too, but this one really hits home for me when I'm almost like coaching myself, because how often do I overcomplicate things, get in my own way, chuck in a load of barriers that don't need to be there. And so the kind of the response to myself when I'm doing those chats with myself is, let it be easy. Like, how can I make this easy? Let it be easy. And it's almost become like a little bit of a mantra for me about how I can make this much easier. But equally, it's kind of broken that inner perfectionist that I had around just everything that I did. And it just makes it so, it's all, for me, it feels like, that big heaving sigh of relief, if that's how that question feels for me. So what does easy look like? Let it be easy. And again, it just takes away all of those barriers straight away. It's like they all just go up in smoke, and you can just like, yeah, okay, that's what easy could look like. And I just think it can be so powerful, even things like supporting family, going to family events, let it be easy. How can this be easy? What does easy look like? And it just gives that extra little like, oh, yeah, okay. So I could buy a dessert instead of making one, or, I could be really boundaried about staying for an hour, or, I could meet my sister beforehand and we can go together, so there's just something about letting things be easy. So what does easy look like? I love it.
So it kind of maybe relates a little bit as well to that idea of labels, like, how would you behave if? Because I think you referenced my my struggles with this, not with this question, but what this question is helping me deal with, is because as a founder, you think you're expected to do certain things, and you're bombarded with experts online every day telling you how you should do things.
Yep.
And exploiting your pain points. They say, if you're worried about your business, you haven't got enough leads yet. Well, that's because you're not creating in the right way. And so you think, maybe I should like create differently, or use AI, or write, or follow this exact format for how I should write a post. Because if I do that, then enough people are going to see me, and enough people see me, then enough people are going to buy from me, and so it goes, right? And really, your job, the thing you feel called to do, has its own kind of momentum and personality, right? It's rolling forward. It wants to go. And sort of my job with Anthem, and I guess your job with People Sorted and all the things you're doing, it's kind of like, how do I stop my insecurities and my flaws and weaknesses, my lack of expertise? How do I stop those things from being a bottleneck to this thing that wants to go, this thing that wants to move forward? Because if I go, I have this sense of calling, and I just got to go out there and create and start making it happen, right? But then I go, but what does it mean to run a business? I shall go on Google and find out how to run a business. And then I get a whole bunch of bits of advice, which kind of give me a whole bunch of new things to be scared shitless about.
Yeah.
And then I spend all my time trying to like run a business in the proper ways rather than just getting out there and talking to people.
Yep.
Right. And so I think this kind of question about what does easy look like, maybe the easy look like for lots of us is going to be, what's the thing that you want to do? What's the thing that you've been put on this earth to say? And then maybe just start saying it. You know, you might not get a ton of reach because you're not writing in a way that appeases the algorithm, but you are going to start being seen by the people who need your specific brand of you.
Yep.
They need to see your experiences. They need to see your scars and where you've been damaged so they can kind of go, oh, someone gets it. Now, if you follow all the rules, then you might be seen by more people, but your story's not going to be heard because you're not telling it. Anyway, I'm sort of getting off.
No, I'm totally
I'm probably
with
wandering
you.
into a different podcast here.
No, I think it's brilliant. And I say that a lot. So I get a lot of approaches for chats and conversations from, you know, new consultants, new founders, that kind of stuff. And that's exactly what I say is, you know, you've just got to be you. I can tell you my formula, but it won't work for you because I'm the secret sauce. You need to work out, you know, what formula works for your secret sauce. And there might be a few tips and tricks and things in there, but actually, you know, even something being seen by a few hundred people is colossal. That is colossal. Imagine if you're thrown into a room with a few hundred people, you'd be petrified. Like you know, I think people get really attached to the numbers and the metrics when the reality is, if you're being yourself, the right people will see you, and that's the important bit. So yeah, I do a lot of conversations around that, so I really like that.
And also, it's the way you build affinity and advocates, right? Like I have got this thing about affinity, advocacy, and opportunity at the moment. This is one of my new kind of phraseologies that I'm playing with. Because when you're you do start to build an affinity, maybe with a small group at first, but you do start to build genuine affinity with people. And those people can go on to become advocates. Like if you begin to focus on those relationships, like if you've got seen by 10 people and you're like, right, I'm going to really focus on these 10 relationships because I've posted something, it's resonated with this 10 people. And because it was so me, then this is kind of like the first signals from my tribe. Yeah. Right? So I'm going to focus on building relationships with these 10 people. And guess what? If some of those 10 become advocates, some of them will hold the door open for you. Somebody will introduce you onward. Some of them might even start to buy from you. Now, I promise you, if you did that for a year, you'd be looking at a pretty solid business model going forward. But it's about that exposure in the right way, which is going to reveal those right relationships. And what I want to say to people actually is on this point is this. We hear a lot about starting with why. You know, it's very popular to say, start with why. Now, if people ask me what my why is...
I'm like, oh, start with why.
I think it is a nigh on impossible question for most people to answer.
Yep, agreed.
Most of us don't know. We're sort of just doing stuff and figuring it out as we go, right? And so my challenge to you, if you're listening to this bit, is to start with who.
Nice.
Who. Start saying, say the thing that you want to say, create in the way that you want to create. Put yourself out there. Then start getting feedback from those people. Focus on those 10. Get a little bit of feedback, get a bit of ideas. And I think slowly your sense of why will begin to emerge from those conversations. But if you start with why, it's going to be a lot of ChatGPT and a lot of Googling and, you know, trying to make it up.
Yeah.
But if you actually can start saying something that feels really important to you, and then talk to those people who've responded to that and say, you know, what was it about that? Or even if you're not sure where your strengths are, go and sit down with your mates and say, hey guys, weird question, but what am I good at?
Yeah.
And you know what? You are going to leave that conversation so pumped up. You're going to love it, right? Number one, it's going to be so affirming for you. But actually, the things that you think you're good at, you're probably not. The things that your friends, they'll tell you what you're good at, and you'll be surprised.
Yeah.
Then you have an idea of where your strengths are. And then you can go, okay, well, if that's my strength, if people find me funny and like relatable, then maybe like I shouldn't write like really stale HR business copy. Maybe I should do what Michelle's doing and be like, you know, release the fire. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I love that.
We're going down. This is probably another episode, but I did want to touch on this Callum, who we're going to mention a couple of times on because he has some really great ideas in the Culture Crush live session. He mentioned around that, what does easy look like, that he and his team, he's a restaurateur, and he and his team were thinking about like, how do they how they make things easier for themselves. And one idea that they had was like, well, what if we tried to make something as bad as possible? Like, what if, rather than trying to make things good, what if you thought, what does really terrible look like, right? And they were thinking about an interview process, if I remember correctly, interview processes. And they said, how can we make the interview process really rubbish? And the idea that came up with is, well, we've got the kitchen porter. Why don't we just have the kitchen porter conduct all interviews going forward? And it, whilst, probably quite a funny idea in the moment, but then they kind of realized something, that the kitchen porter is sort of this under-respected member of the team in lots of places. They know the kitchen in a way that nobody else knows the kitchen. They do the kind of the dirty jobs that no one else wants to do, right? They understand how the kitchen works at a unique level. And they were like, this person really should, they might not be the only person interviewed, but they should be in every interview to bring that unique perspective. And so that process of like, how do we just blow this thing up, got them to this really, really great idea. So that's kind of another way around. What does easy look like? But also, what does terrible look like? What's the worst version of this thing? It might take you some interesting places. Last question, and the one that is my favorite from our time together in Culture Crush Live. But what does 1% better feel like?
This one is a biggie for me. So, and I think I might have mentioned it on the Culture Crush Live that we did. But for me, I am a human who lives with depression and a number of other things, but lives with depression, lives with fatigue. You and I have talked about this a number of times. And actually, when you are in the midst of those moments, actually, you just feel like you can't get out of them. There's nothing else. It's all encompassing. You're just in that dark cloud and you can't get out. But actually, the one thing that did get me out was this question. So what does 1% better feel like? And so what that did for me in very practical terms was, it was like, actually, maybe that's a shower, maybe having a shower and just feeling really nice and clean. I remember how nice that feels. I'm going to do that. Or, maybe it's just sitting in the garden, but actually that feeling, like I'm thinking about that feeling of fresh air, sun on my face, the warmth of the patio. It just kind of, it creates and evokes something really quite possible but powerful in me. So things that I can suddenly do that feel very doable, but also things that create that sense of self, that kind of mind-body connection is massive for me. So if I can connect back to my body in some way, I can move, I can do something, I can kind of make it 1% better. And I kind of pitch to a lot of people when I do speaking gigs, coaching, that kind of stuff, is those 1% every day will add up, and it will create a better space for you the more you do it every day. And it only has to be 1% a day. Lots of people get overexcited and they're like 1% every hour, and then by the end of the week I'll be 240% more amazing. Like that's that's the perfectionist Michelle way to do it. But the reality is that 1% can be so powerful if you let it be. That kind of feeling, that really felt sense of how that lands with you, can be much more powerful than just do one small thing. It just seems to make a massive difference to me.
What I love about that is people, I think, are often, how do I shift my mood dramatically? I'm looking for a solution all the time. I'm looking to troubleshoot all the time. And I think it's sort of like one interesting segue that I've noticed about the difference between me and my wife recently is that I can sometimes find myself struggling with disappointment, or feeling like I haven't got a plan, or haven't got anything to look forward to today. And I've realized about myself that I'm often laying track. I'm often trying to keep the train of our life on the road and in a happy place. And so I'm constantly thinking about the next thing. How do I make the next thing good? And my wife does a really good job of reminding me that just being in the moment together, that's enough for her, right? Yep. She's really content in that moment. And so whilst I'm busy, like, oh, how do we make the next thing exciting and great? She's like, just hang out with me.
Yeah.
Right. That's that. I don't need you to be laying track all the time and trying to keep this thing on the road. It's on the road. Don't worry about it so much. And so I'm in that kind of problem solving mindset quite often. I think it's exacerbated by being your own boss as well. It's like you don't switch off at the end of the day. No one's telling you what to do, so you feel like you've got to do everything. Mm-hmm. So for me, I'm often in that kind of like, how do I shift a mindset? And what I love about what you're saying here is that don't troubleshoot so much, actually. Like, don't go for a big mindset shift. Like, what does 1% better feel like in this moment? And maybe if you are somebody who's like stuck on the sofa, like struggling with some isolating thoughts, maybe it's a little like, maybe we could sit up for a second. Like maybe you don't need to think about how do I solve this problem, but actually it's how do you just make yourself more comfortable right now?
Yep.
Or maybe there's like your favorite sitcom that you watch over and over again, and you think, oh, I shouldn't watch it again because I need to have a mindset shift and do something productive in my life.
Yeah.
No, maybe it's okay to go back to the beginning and go, do you know what? This just feels good for me right now.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give myself permission to do that.
Yeah. It's so true. So true. And I love the sofa analogy and the sitcom stuff. And it reminded me that when I was burned out, and I think I said this again on our call, but when I was burned out, I literally spent 6 weeks just staring at the wall, trying to like calm my nervous system, trying to ease that rushing heart that I had all day, every day. And the one thing that always worked, no matter what, was Blue Planet. Always. Like whenever I watch Blue Planet, and even now when I go back and watch it, when I just want a little comfort something, Blue Planet always does it. I don't know if it's David Attenborough. I don't know if it's the water. I don't know if it's the colour, because it's quite a blue shot series. It always works. So if you are that person on the sofa, try Blue Planet.
Yeah, there we go. And David Attenborough, you've been called out on Culture Crush. I don't know what we would talk about if you came on the show, but you've had a long and interesting career, and everybody loves you. We'd have a great chat. So come on the show. Now, Polly had a great question on this point, because again, somebody who'd been recently promoted was now leading a team. Again, I think, Polly, if I've misunderstood that, apologies. But she was talking about team confidence and people in that she's working with that are demonstrating some elements of low confidence. And she asked you your recommendations for how do you take your team members on that 1% journey. I don't know if you had any more thoughts about that from a kind of like, if you are a team leader, how are you going to bring this idea to your people?
Yeah, I know from my team, we had, and actually multiple teams that I've worked with now, had an overwhelming amount of workload. And often that's because, you're under-resourced or underfunded or whatever. But in my two scenarios I had with my teams, it was very much under-resourced. We needed extra bodies, but we couldn't get them. It was that impossible moment where you just have to kind of do what you can in the moment that you've got. And so for us, what that looked like was every day we'd have what we called a morning huddle for 30 minutes. And within that, we'd go through like Gantt chart level stuff that we had to do. But what I said to them was, make this the most horrendous spreadsheet you've ever seen. Tuck in everything you can think of that we need to do to hit these milestones, and we'll work on it every day. And you know what? With both teams, we hit every single milestone we needed to hit. We delivered every single thing we needed to deliver with fewer team members than we'd ever had. So I think there's something about the power of that 1%, right? Because you're just thinking, do you know what? Here's the big goal. The big goal is delivering this business plan at the end of the year. Actually, those 25 micro goals of organising, planning, eventing, whatever you need to do, are feeling much more doable. And because we met every day and we talked about it every day, the team were just so focused on what they needed to do. And I was so able to see what they were doing and jump in and help out and help the team to work on what they needed, that it just became, and I was going to say easy, but it wasn't easy, but it just became so much more like tangible, manageable, less of this big scary thing waiting for a few months' time. And I think that got rid of that procrastination stress monster for us. So that's where I think it can really land with teams. And I know on the call, we talked about that power of like recognition and praise as well. So for me, there's a really big one about noticing when your team is doing well, or noticing when your team is doing something that is praiseworthy. I loved that you smashed that phone call with your difficult stakeholder. Like, absolutely brilliant. I loved hearing you push back in the way that you do. Like, so, even that is something that can be just that little nudge that someone might need to give that confidence back. So yeah, I think that's it really. Micro moments, micro praise and recognition, I think, is big for me.
I think there are going to be team leaders who, just in the busyness of everything, are thinking, yeah, but how do you track that stuff? Like, how do you really how do you make it easy to track the stuff.
Yeah.
Without kind of like jumping into a portal or kind of like having a really long KPI conversation that lasts for weeks. Like, how do you do it? How do you make it? How do you close the gap between the idea of like praise and recognition and 1% better and how that feels, and being able to track some stuff at the same time? And Callum, who we mentioned already, he had this great idea, something that he and his team did. It was a kind of you call it a post-it note development plan. Where the staff in his kitchen would choose a goal for that week, right? So we're talking micro goals. And the example he gave said, so you might have a server who can't carry 3 plates yet. And so their goal, they'd write on a post-it like carry 3 plates. So something simple, something to practice, something really actionable. And they'd put it up on the board. And that's the thing they'd work on for that week. And what they would do is that once they'd achieved that goal, they'd take that post-it down, replace it with a different colored post-it so people can see the progress, and they'd write a new goal. And all that he did as the manager was collect that stack of post-its, and then in a review meeting, then would say, here are your post-its for the last few months, and you go through them one by one and talk about them. Now, what I love about that idea is that really is an example of what does easy look like, whilst also bringing some actual data into some of those kind of like ongoing one-to-one review meetings, those kind of regular check-ins with your team. But it's also celebrating those little micro movements, those little things that you can build in your day-to-day. So that 1% post-it note development plan, what a brilliant idea.
Yeah, I love it. And I remember when Callum talked about it, I was literally like eyes on stalks, like listening, because I was so fascinated by it. I just think it's brilliant. And I also really love that it has that additional like visual bit. I could almost see it in the restaurant at the back of the, the hostess space, but at the back where you've got the spikes for the receipts, you can almost see people putting their post-its on their own little spikes, can't you? Of just like then stacking them up and seeing how much they've done. I think it's brilliant. It's such a great idea.
That's a great idea. And you're so right. There was literally it sounds quite funny to reflect on it, right? But there was something so beautifully simple about it. There was literally a gasp from some people on the call, because I've listened back to it. People like had this kind of like physical, audible reaction to this great idea. And it seems kind of funny to think about, like, it's a post-note development plan. Like, why would people feel so emotionally responsive to that? And it's because there are lots of people on the call who really struggle with this kind of stuff. They're trying to be excellent leaders. They're really trying to support and care for their people, but it's really hard. So when somebody has this idea that feels just so easy to execute, you go, oh my gosh, what a relief. What a great idea. So it really was a powerful kind of out of the blue moment for us. Yeah. Now, we are coming in to land, Michelle, but I wanted just to kind of create a little bit of space at the end, just to think, where would you encourage somebody to start with some of these questions today? Like, what's the kind of, how does somebody first engage with some of these spaces? Maybe it's kind of revisiting one of those questions. You want to say, this is the one that I want people to take away today, or it might be something else entirely. But I wanted to kind of create the moment to say, where do you want people to go next with some of the things that we'll be talking about? Oh,
I love this. Yeah. I mean, I would say pick the question that resonates most for you and just see where it lands. I mean, I know we spoke earlier about, the experimentation mindset, but I think if you take anything away from hanging out with us for this hour, is have that experimentation mindset and try something, because it's less scary if it's an experiment, right? And it's more fun. So I would say take the question that really resonates with you and just experiment with it, play with it, have fun with it, see where it takes you. And let us know, because I'd love to know how people balance it. But I think have a go with one of the questions that really resonates and let it be an experiment for you in your growth and development journey. Let it be an experiment and see where it takes you.
Michelle, I love that idea of treating this like an experiment. Think about those 3 questions. Number 1, how do we get to yes? Number 2, what does easy look like? And number 3, what does 1% better feel like? What experiments can you run this week at home, at work, in your day-to-day, that it can help you dive into one of those questions? And as Michelle said, get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear kind of like how you're balancing this stuff. Like, what has it prompted in you? Where have you reacted? Where has it changed something for you? We would love to hear your thoughts. But Michelle, I think we're about done. As expected, you've been an absolute dream to speak to for this episode. And thank you so much for making some time for both Culture Crush Live and for the recording. It's been so wonderful to spend this time with you. And of course, we'll speak again soon, right?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you. I loved both. I thought it was brilliant. And I love hanging out with you anyway. So it's all good. I loved it. Thank you.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Culture Crush. If you've enjoyed your time with us, please like and subscribe wherever you're listening from. And if you're a Culture First leader, visit anthem.oo and come and join us for the next Culture Crush Live. It would be awesome to see you there.